All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Living in Alignment podcast. And I'm here today with beautiful Susan Hamilton Meier. And Susan is a branding expert. I'm excited to have her on the show today. I think this conversation is going to be really helpful for everybody. She's a branding expert and career coach who helps people find the through line of their work history, write a focused, memorable elevator pitch, and design a vision and action plan for the next phase of their journey. And for more than 20 years, Susan has helped Fortune 500 companies define brand strategy and create distinctive messaging. And she uses these tools along with what she's learned on her own Zig Zag career path across business, art, and parenting to empower people to craft their personal brand and discover a roadmap toward a life of purpose. Wow. I love this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. So, I guess I know we have a lot of juicy stuff to talk about, but I'd love to, just give you the opportunity to just, introduce yourself, maybe tell a little bit about your story and how you got to where you're at now. And we'd love to get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So I started my career in management consulting, and already that was a little bit of a zigzag. You used that word in introducing me, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later because that's a topic I have a lot of thoughts on. But when I talk about having a zigzag path, I really came from a background where I was an artist. I was an art major in college. I did not study business or economics, and then I went into the world of business and specifically management consulting, partly because I found that really fascinating because it was so different from what I had studied before. I loved then, and I still love the strategy piece, like unlocking complex puzzles, trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together, and doing a little bit of a treasure hunt, right, to figure out what the right direction to go may be. So I spent the beginning of my career doing that in a generalized way for large corporations. I got really interested in branding because I was working in BCG's consumer practice, and we did a lot of consumer research where we would go out and speak to folks who loved a particular brand or maybe had stopped loving a particular brand. I worked across everything from books to financial services to lingerie, and many other things. I found it really compelling what a personal and intimate and passionate relationship people had with the brands that they cared about. And I wanted to know more about that from a human perspective. I also was drawn into branding because it allowed me to have a visual component to the work that I was doing. Management consulting, strategic management consulting is much more of a, purely cognitive and somewhat quantitative discipline. And I wanted to combine that with my kind of visual side, which is really what the discipline of branding does. So I've been working in brand strategy for the last 20 years. I worked with some boutique agencies. I was choosing the folks that I worked with really from that perspective of where can I have a strategy role where it's very integrated with the design piece, so that I could have that experience and, offer my talents and also have fun, and doing that kind of work. And then 12 years ago, I started my own independent consultancy. I did specifically and intentionally want to keep it an independent consultancy as opposed to building an agency. Partly for lifestyle reasons. I was a mom of young kids at that time. And even as they've gotten older, it's been really nice to be able to have that kind of independence and flexibility. Also, because I do still have an art studio practice, that also I can kind of build in my schedule to accommodate that. And from a running the business perspective, I've been able to choose the portfolio of clients that I work with. Going back to, we talked a little bit earlier about purpose and mission, and you have much more control over that when you're running your own business. So happily, I really enjoy being an entrepreneur, and that's all worked out. But I skipped over some of the stuff in the early career, which was very zigzaggy. I joined an agency, then I went back to freelancing. I worked in interior design. I did some art advisory work. And so the clients I work with now, and it's been in the last 3 or 4 years that I started taking the same kind of toolkit that I worked with large organizations and kind of designed over the years for them to help. Started out with small businesses, and then I started getting requests from individuals who were saying, we all see ourselves as brands, right? It's not just when you have a business, it could be that you're looking for a job or you're looking for a board seat. I need to tell my story. I need to have a website. I need to have a visual language for the communication touch points that I'm putting out there into the world. Can you help me with that? And so that's how the coaching business grew. And I developed materials, I developed a workbook that's specifically for that audience, but it's all based on those kind of sophisticated marketer corporate tools that come from strategy and come from, design agency world. And I work with largely people who, like me, have had eclectic careers with twists and turns, and it makes your story much more interesting in the end, but it makes it a little bit harder to kind of package, right? People come and they say, oh my gosh, I've done all these different things. How is anybody going to know what box to fit me in? So there's a little bit of a confidence piece, like, it's okay, you don't have to fit in a box, right? And then there's but how are we going to help you tell your story so that you can be comfortable going to that, party or event, or knowing what to say in your 2-liner and LinkedIn and all the other places where we need to introduce ourselves.
So much good stuff here to unpack. So one of the things, I love this so much. I love, the idea of not putting ourselves in a box. And I feel like I too have many, I got a college degree, and then after that, every year or two, I'd be like, I want to get certified in this. And now I want to be a personal trainer. And now I'm going to be a realtor. And I was married at the time, and my husband at the time was like, your business card should be an accordion. I was a doula, and then I did pre and postnatal fitness, and all of it. Right. And,
I'm giggling right now because I'm also a certified yoga teacher and a certified doula. So
yeah, so I feel like we're human beings. We have so many interests and so many passions and so much curiosity that leads us down these different paths. And so I love this conversation because I feel like, no, we shouldn't have to put ourselves in a box. And yet we do have to be able to, when somebody asks us what we do or who we help or whatever, we need to be able to answer that in a way, in an as you call it, elevator pitch kind of way. That's not like this long drawn out thing where you're telling people your whole life story and now where you're at now. So I love this so much. And another thing for you guys to know, which I also love, is that Susan is, I know she kind of mentioned it, she's an artist. Is that your jewelry that you're wearing? All of that?
Yes,
So she makes this beautiful jewelry and does all this beautiful artwork. And does all this consulting and coaching for business owners, right? So this is a perfect example of she's got this creative artist thing going on over here, and over here she's helping people build their businesses. You don't have to pick. You don't, right? You can do all the things you want to do and help all the people you want to help in all the ways that you want to help, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's gotten better over the years in the world of Etsy and side hustles, and people are a little bit less rigid than they were a generation ago about, you pick your job, you climb the corporate ladder, and that being kind of the paradigm. But even now, there's, it boils down to that challenge that I don't think ever goes away of you meet somebody new, or you have to write your profile somewhere, and you just don't have that much real estate in which to tell your story. And so you need to find a way to tell the nugget of the story. There's time for questions later, right? There's time for details later, but what's the core essence of who you are that's important? And read the room, right? Who's the audience for your message? So, you need to have one message that applies for everyone, but you can also dial up or dial down different parts of your story depending on who you're talking to. And so that becomes sort of the later on nuances of the work.
I love that read the room part, because that it makes a lot of sense, especially if we're operating in multiple niches or whatever we want to be addressing. I just did a video about this yesterday where I was talking about if you're in the health and wellness niche and you're in the affiliate marketing niche, when you put out like a free offer online for people to opt into, if someone opts in to learn your weight loss tips, you're not going to send them your affiliate marketing tips in like when you send out those emails. You're not going to send that. You need to like speak to the people, give them what they're following you for.
Yes.
Um,
The only caveat to that, I will say, is that sometimes you may be surprised by the things that people do find interesting about you that are not what you might expect. So in my kind of corporate work, I do a lot of work in healthcare. So in that world, I never felt uncomfortable sharing, my yoga or doula experience because that was relevant. But I was a little shy about sharing the artistic part. And what I discovered when I finally did mention that to clients, and I now have it on my website, but I didn't for many years, they went, "Oh, this all makes so much sense. Your decks are so beautiful." And that's actually one of the things we really value about working with you. You bring us the strategy, you bring us kind of like the heat and the gravitas and like the good thinking. But what really makes a pop in the room is we use your materials. In the case I'm thinking of, I was creating sales materials for a digital health organization. And they said, our salespeople go into a room and the client takes notice before they've even started to engage with the content because our materials look so different from what's out there in the healthcare space. I get it now. That's because you're an artist. And that came as a surprise to me that was valuable to them. So I think that's another kind of cool insight. Share who you are, like
Yep.
just be who you are. You don't know exactly yet. Yes, read the room. It's a little bit of a delicate balance, but also don't be afraid to be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is something I know we talked briefly beforehand about how you pointed out that I don't like the idea of niching down too much. I have always been an advocate for like sharing who you are. Like people will relate to you as a whole person. Like we're all unique, and I'm not just an affiliate marketer, or I'm not just a, whatever it is that you do. I also play the guitar, and I'm not like the best musician in the world. And it's not like I have all these albums out there or whatever, but every once in a while I will make a video of me playing the guitar, or I would share some video footage of me like running a 10K race with my kids on Memorial Day and stuff like that, just to let people into the other components of who I am as a person. Because I think when somebody is making a decision about who they want to work with in whatever your niche is or whatever your specialty is, there's certain parts of you that are relatable to people that if they didn't know that about you, they wouldn't relate to you the same way. So I have over the years attracted a lot of single moms into my work because I've been a single mom for so long. And I've also attracted like people that play the guitar because they see that I play the guitar and they're like, oh, I want to work with her because she plays the guitar. So I think it's important to share these other sides of ourselves, even if it's, not in a like major way, but just to not try to be all about business all the time, because it doesn't allow people to really get to know you. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the most interesting, creative, curious, fun to be around people have all those sides to them. Like think about the people that you're friends with. Of course, that's who you want to work with as well. I was working with a client who's a real estate agent. She's been building her real estate business. And I happened to know that because she's a friend of a friend, I happened to know that she had had a whole career on Broadway as an actor before she started doing this. Now, we were 2 sessions in. She had not mentioned that at all. And I said, Barb, tell me more about your previous life, right? She was like, well, I don't know if that's relevant. And by the time we finished working together, she had come up with, it's not what she's going to lead with necessarily. She's not going to talk all about that on her website. But we'd been able to come up with like, what are the characteristics that drew you into acting and singing? What did you learn from those experiences? And how does that show up in the work that you do now?
I
And
love
how
it.
might that be valuable to your clients? So just the behind the scenes piece. And then, oh, by the way, what happens when your clients do find out that you had that past life? And she's like, oh, they always think it's really cool. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course they do. Don't be afraid to
Mm.
share that. And I
Yeah.
think that, I was in a slightly different way. I was kind of singing this song for years with corporate clients, like, be human. I used to give a
Mm.
presentation called Brand Human. It's the humanity that people connect with. And, sophisticated consumer marketers really understand this. Think about like a Coke or Pepsi ad. It's not about what's in the can. It's about this kind of human experience that you're
Mhm.
connecting to. And, I think if you're selling software or pharmaceuticals or anything that has like a scientific basis or technology base, like, well, I used to do work for a light bulb manufacturer. You're like, well, we've got this like revolutionary technology for LED lights and, all these specifications about the lifespan of the bulb and the degrees Kelvin and all this stuff. And we worked with them for a long time to get them around to, and we had to do a bunch of consumer research to get them to see this. Like, people aren't buying degrees Kelvin. They're buying what the light feels like in their home. They're
Mhm.
buying the quality of light, which equates to the quality of life, right? That was a huge insight for them. That's a human connection, right? And it's, depending on your business, it can be easier or harder to get there. But yeah, so that's true for big companies, for small companies, and it's certainly true for individuals, right? You want to make a human connection with the people that you're trying to, cultivate in your tribe, whether that's somebody you're trying to sell something to, or maybe it's somebody you want to collaborate with as a partner, or somebody you want to hire as an employee, or, you just want some cheerleaders out there. You got to show them yourself, your whole self.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Can you explain, because I know we talked about this in the bio, and I think it's just a good kind of goes into this conversation as well. I know you talk a lot about the zigzag path and why it's valuable. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's got a lot to do with what we've already talked about how we all have like this, we all got here from some like random zigzaggy kind of way. Like we didn't just, I mean, I guess some people graduate, they graduate high school, they go to college, they get a degree, they get a job, and they stay there for the rest of their lives. But a lot of us don't do that.
But
So
very few.
yeah,
And they probably don't need help telling their story, right? So,
exactly. Yeah. So for
and
those of us that haven't been zigzagging, we
right.
need to know how to tell our stories.
Yeah. And no, so the zigzag path is what it sounds like. It's the opposite of the straight line path that you just described. It's the journey that most of us are on, where we're interested in a number of different things, and maybe we bounce around from one to the other. Maybe we, have a few going on at the same time. And I think that we historically have been told or somehow messaged that that's something to hide, or that lowers your credibility. Um,
Mm,
and that, it's a, so I always say, like, it's a feature, not a bug, right? Like, it actually has benefits. So what happens when you play in multiple spheres? Like, you're not stuck in your bubble. So you have more friends, right? You have more colleagues, you have more connections, you just have a deeper and broader network. You have more skills because you've done different things in different areas. I have a client who's a music producer, who was a music producer and then got into a real estate digital offering. Completely different word. Now she's working in technology. She's going out to raise capital, right? And she's like, I don't tell anybody about that. But the funny thing is, people do always comment about like what great social skills I have and how I really like can bring the group together, and like I make our events and outings really fun. And she was like, I'm sure that comes from my years in the music business, because that was like so highly valued. And, I had to learn to do that really well in the music business. Oh yeah. And also when I'm producing music, I had to be really, people were impressed that I had these kind of business skills, that I knew how to run a spreadsheet and that I knew how to do planning. And that's because I had trained in business, and, which I now am gone back to. So all these things kind of link with each other, whether it's the skills that are operating underneath what you're doing, or even in your, stated messaging or positioning or the story that you tell that, people find engaging or fun. And then finally, I think corollary to all of that, I think you're just more innovative, right? You're coming up with new ideas. If that's the definition of creativity or innovation, is this intersection of ideas from different spheres, that's generally how we spark innovation. I did a lot of branding and innovation are often linked, especially in agencies. And so I did innovation work for years, and it's very, very hard to come up with new ideas. Innovation projects are difficult. And the way in is that you bring inspiration from categories outside the one that you're working, different industries, or you come within your industry, but different product. You always trying to bring things from outside to see how they collide and react. And so if you're a person who's done a bunch of different things, you're going to be drawing on that just intuitively because you've been there, you've seen that, and you're going to go, wait, that worked in healthcare. Maybe that would work in, sneakers, right? Who knows where it's going to come from. But so I think those are the benefits. There are probably many others, including it being just more fun and following your heart. But no, I think there are very specific business benefits, quantifiable.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned all of it. I wrote some of them down. More friends, a broader network, more skills, more innovative. So I think this is really important stuff for people to really think about when you're sitting there thinking, I'm all over the place. I'm not specific enough. Nobody's going to take me seriously. So for somebody that now is like, okay, so there are benefits to this. So how do we now hone in on our story? Like, how do we kind of brand ourselves with all of this stuff on our zigzag path that we've had along the way to come across in a way that helps people get to know us in the most powerful way?
Yeah. So I've been working on developing that process for a long time, as I said, and, it takes a long time to get something down to something really simple. So what I'm going to tell you is going to sound really simple, but it's really powerful. So starting with who you are, but like really looking at who you are. I'm going to get back to all the different ways we do that. On the other side, imagine a Venn diagram, right? Overlapping circles. Who are you and who are they? So you're going to think about who you are, and then you're going to think about who your audience is or who your tribe is. Like, what is your, obviously start with what is your intention, right? What are your goals? But like, who are you trying to connect with? When you tell that story, when you write a story, there's a reader. When you tell the story, there's an audience. Who is the audience, or who are the different audiences for the story that you're going to tell? And then you look at where it overlaps. So thinking about who you are, I encourage people to think about all their different bits and pieces. So I have them do collaging exercises using ideally pictures and not words. And then we talk through the words, but really, it's a little easier to loosen up when you're just drawing pictures. Like, show me pictures of just stuff that you're drawn to, people who have like a demeanor or posture that you like, or colors that speak to you, or shapes. And then we talk about what is that. And in that conversation, all of those bits and pieces are more likely to come out than if you came in and I said, okay, write down, who you are and like what you do. And then they're going to give you like the bio that they've been kind of using for years, right? But like dig into everything, personal, professional, just like who you are. Then when we talk about what are your values? So we do the core values exercise where you got to choose just 2 values, not things you value, but like when you think about the decisions that you've made at the inflection points in your life and you've decided to go right or not left, what was it that you chose? Like, what was your guiding principle? Was it curiosity? Was it stability? Was it freedom, right? Was it, and you name it, there's hundreds of different options. And that is always really enlightening for people to understand what motivates them, because most of us we probably have an inkling, but we don't sit down and do that exercise. And then we talk through, okay, what does that word mean to you specifically? Because language means different things to different people, and a lot of interesting stuff comes out there. How does that show up? So talk about some of those examples of, how you've made decisions in the past and how that's brought you to where you are today, and how might it guide you in the future? right? And there's a few other exercises about, getting to know yourself, that, we put it all together and you start to see themes. You start to see what I call the clear, shiny thread, like the essence that connects all of those things that you've done that felt disconnected before. And whether, it's an obvious external connection that's visible to the world, or if it's more of a like, this is the way I do things, no matter what I do. Those things become really helpful in thinking about, how to kind of package, for lack of a better word, what your story is going to be. Then we think about your audience and think about them from a human perspective, not just, I often have people come and I'll say, okay, so who's your target client? And they'll say, well, it's a company that's, between 2 million and 10 million people, and they sell software. Okay, but who's the person that you're going to work with? Tell me about that person. Are they, like is particular characteristics, demographics? Okay, what are they thinking about? What keeps them up at night? What do they aspire to? How do they want to be seen in the world? What are their challenges? And really trying to get inside the head of, and in an ideal world, you would then also go and interview some of them and find out if you were right. But you start with the hypotheses about that already. It's super helpful to bring it down to like, there's a human being that's going to read my proposal or read my LinkedIn page, not a company, because a company doesn't hire you, a person hires you.
Right.
So bringing those things together, we think about, so once we've thought about who they are, okay, then what are the problems that they have? What are the problems they have that you can solve? What are they looking for when they're in the mindset of looking for someone like you? Can you articulate that in the first person so that you're really standing in their shoes with empathy? And then we use all those bits and pieces, and I have a little like framework template that's artificially rigid that I make people do for their first draft of their story, so that it contains all those things. Like, here's what I do, here's how it's different, here's why it's great, here's who it's for, here's, what they benefit from, and here's kind of what they get out of that benefit. And then we massage it so it's like more in your voice, and it's, the right setting, and there's a couple versions of it that you can use. And then we complete it all with a, charting your path set of exercises. So where are you going to go from here? Now that you know kind of what you care about and what you bring to the table that's unique and different. And I also start that one off with like a big throw up everything in the air and, list 100 things that you want. Some of them are crazy, come to, maybe there are some that are crazy that might actually be really important to you. How can you maybe break through some of those barriers? And that gets people just like, okay, not just I came in knowing I want this job and that's what I'm going for. Still do that, but also, can you think bigger, and can you think more deeply about what's important to you? And then we get into some of the real practical stuff, like, do you like to speak? Do you like to write? Do you like to make videos? Like, how are you going to share your message? And what are those messages going to be? And can you tighten up? Like, these are the 2 or 3 things that I want to talk about when I'm talking out in the world, and where and how will you be sharing those things?
Oh my gosh, I love this process. I love that clear, shiny thread piece. And I would love for you to kind of touch on, because this is something that comes up all the time with my audience, is people comparing themselves to other people and feeling like they need to do things a certain way, or they need to say things a certain way, or they need to market themselves the way somebody else does, using a strategy that works for somebody else, rather than just really just doing it like intuitively what feels best to them without constantly comparing. I always use the example of Oprah Winfrey, because I heard her say that when she was up and coming, like before she was who she is now, she said she like unsubscribed from everything, every email, everything, because she never wanted to be tempted to try to do things the way someone else is doing them. She wanted to make sure that she was completely authentic all the time without any outside voices making her feel like she should be doing it a different way. And I know most of us don't do that. Most of us have a lot of feedback coming from all over the place in our lives. And then we're like, well, if so-and-so is having success doing this, then maybe that's what I should do. Or maybe I should pretend that I'm more whatever because that person has the kind of job that I want or whatever. So can you speak to that piece about like just owning your uniqueness, trusting your intuition, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I didn't know that story about Oprah, and and look how successful that strategy was for her. That's great.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I feel really strongly about this. I think you're maybe familiar with this. I think it's a piece of research that's been widely shared about, a big driver of unhappiness is comparing yourself to others.
Mhm.
And because there's always going to be someone who has more than you. There's also always going to be somebody who has less than you. But like, what good is that? Like the
Mhm.
comparative, analysis. And I think it's difficult in the business context. Like one of the first things they teach you in business school, or like, Michael Porter's 5 forces, or there's a whole bunch of frameworks, and they all have competition in there. And the whole notion of strategy is built on war, right? Like that you're trying to beat the competition, that there's an enemy, and you're trying to figure out your strategy and push back the enemy and advance. And that can be useful in some cases. It's good to do some benchmarking, for example, to kind of know what's going on in your industry. But I feel really strongly that even in your most kind of conventional strategy business context, it's easy to spend too much time analyzing the competition and not enough time really thinking about what you want to do, what you are or can be good at, what you want to stand for in the world. And yes, to understand how you're different, I guess you need to know what's out there, but really it's more important to know what you do and what you can do, and really focus more on yourself. And I think about it as when I was young, I was a swimmer. And, one of the first things they teach you, because when you're a little kid, right, you're swimming along and you want to look over into the next lane. And so that's the first thing they kind of like train out of you. It's like, keep your head down, stay in your lane, focus on your stroke, focus on your time. Don't worry about what the person in the next lane is doing. And I think that is so relevant. Like that metaphor really sticks with me. I think it's really easy to be popping your head up to look at what everybody else is doing. And guess what? That slows you down.
Mhm.
Focus on being the best that you can be, building your own process, your own stroke, and like defining what you're like. Oprah, she defined a whole new lane. Like she created a whole new way of being. That's what happens when you focus on yourself and not worry about what everyone else is doing.
Mhm. And I love this because I feel like people do it even like right what I've seen in my line of work is people like right out of the gate, they want to start a business. And so they start trying to build a website that looks like somebody else's website, or they try to find the colors that somebody else is using in their brand or a logo, like stuff that does not move the needle at all. But before they even do what it is they're a stand for in the world, they're worried about their branding because they're already comparing themselves to other people's branding. And I know you do a lot around branding. So can you speak to that a little bit? Because I feel like people waste a lot of time, and they're not like, I know you also like to talk about the process of being creative in your work. And I feel like every time we're trying to base our branding off of somebody else's branding, our creativity is not there, and we're not representing ourselves either, right?
Yeah. So the first part about, creating your brand, it's so tempting. And I so get it. First of all, you want it to be brought to life. You have this idea and you want it to be visually brought to life right away. You can't wait to get started. And also you think, okay, I'm doing this on a shoestring maybe, or even if not on a shoestring, do I really want to waste the time and effort and money to go through that process of like strategic positioning and messaging and whatnot? Like, let's just get a website up there, right? Let's just get the logo designed. And I get it, but I see it over and over again. People come to me and they're like, I just wasted so much money and so much time, and none of my stuff makes sense. It's totally out of control. I need to go back to the beginning and start over and like figure out what it is that I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and then how does that get brought to life? So I am always advising people, take the time. It doesn't have to be long or expensive or onerous, but take the time to think about your strategic branding before you get out there, your positioning, essentially, like, who are you in the world and what is it that you have to say before you get out there and start like throwing content against the wall and like designing stuff. Because as you said, the only way to design stuff, if you do it that way, is to just look around at other people and kind of copy what they're doing. Because where's the inspiration for that? But if you do the work first to say, here's what I'm about, these are the 3 things that I stand for, these are my core values, then you have something to build on. And you say, oh, okay, my brand is about joy. What are the colors that I would associate with that, right? What are some of the symbols or visual elements? Okay, well, maybe we're going to incorporate like a sun into our logo, but there's a reason for it. It's
Yep.
not just random. And yeah, there's, in brand design, there are visual cues, like there's certain colors that tend to be associated with certain industries or colors to avoid if it's a food product or whatnot. But honestly, rules are made to be broken. And if there's some good reason that you want to make your, steak brand purple, it's okay. Like maybe it's actually going to be very differentiated. So really do the work before you spend the money on that stuff is my advice.
Well, I always also say that, when it comes to anything digital online, everything is editable. We are going to evolve over time. And like you said, the only way that we evolve is by actually doing the work. And as we do the work, we can change our branding as needed as we see who we evolve into or whatever, rather than like putting ourselves in a box right out of the gate, trying to look like whoever, and then feeling like confined by that box.
Yeah, somebody was just asking me this yesterday, like, so how often do I have to redo my branding? Can we just like get it right this time and then I never have to do it again? Unfortunately, probably not. Like life changes, you're going to evolve, the business is going to evolve, like the world and style trends are going to evolve, and like, it doesn't have
Technology evolves.
technology is going to evolve. But the good thing, like you were saying about technology, like back in the day, right, it used to be not only did you spend the money doing the design, but then you were doing print runs. Everything was printed. And then you have a stack of brochures or business cards and you're like, oh, we're going to redesign our brand. And what are we going to throw all that stuff away? So that happily isn't burdening us so much anymore. And it is relatively easy to evolve your brand. You need to do the kind of creative work, but you don't have a stack of physical items, or not as many to deal with as rebrand or refresh.
Yeah, because even like website layouts have changed over the years. Now everybody's got this big hero image on their site. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
Websites didn't used to look like that.
Yeah.
And so we have to keep up with the times in that sense too. Otherwise we look outdated, right?
Yeah.
So, and thankfully with technology,
it's fine to look around. It's not that you don't look around at all, right? It's fine to know what's happening and what the trends are, but there's a balance, there's a line before, you're copying. It's fine to get inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about the creativity piece? Like, how do we stay creative in our daily work without, again, like in our own way and without trying to be creative by copying other people?
Sure. I mean, so the first one I think was part of what we already talked about, like do all the different stuff that you like to do, hop into all those different bubbles that you're interested in. And if you're not a person who like that comes naturally to, like push yourself a little bit, like go to a meetup, take a class, like just, expand your horizons a little bit, because any new input is going to enhance your creativity. Another thing that I know something about and I find really interesting is like the space where you work. So during the pandemic, when we were all a little bit like, what's happening? I have a little more time on my hands. I started a project with a friend of mine who's a photographer, where we wanted to profile people's workspaces, particularly to understand what helps them be creative and productive in this world where the whole notion of a workspace was changing, like what are those things that people had crafted for themselves in a work at home environment in order to continue to be creative and productive, or creatively productive. And so we have a blog about that. But so there's themes that have come out of that, which I find really interesting. One, which is fairly obvious, is like boundaries, right? Like you actually need some space to yourself. And I say it's fairly obvious, and yet, large company workspace design has migrated to this open plan cubicle thing for decades now, despite the fact that all the research points to that being extremely unproductive. So yeah, even if it's not like a permanent office with a door that closes, finding a way to create kind of some portion of concentrated alone time where you can decompress, think big thoughts without interruptions. Some of that is not even the space, it's the time. So there's a whole bunch of stuff about calendaring and how to try to create space in your calendar. You may have heard of like the maker's calendar versus the manager's calendar. And so a maker being more like the creative process, you do need bigger uninterrupted blocks of time. And if you are constantly like going into meetings and you have a half an hour free here and an hour free there, it's very difficult to do something like a piece of writing, right? So there's that. Another one I find really interesting is the importance of light and some kind of nature. It could be like a cut flower. It doesn't have to be that you're, I live in New York City, so I'm not looking at nature out my windows right now, unfortunately, but I have a ton of plants in here. And it turns out that there is a ton of research about that. And when we did this little project, every single person mentioned how important it was, the little plant. Yes, they're happy. I mean, it's also like the science of they're cleaning the air that you're breathing, but they also just make us happy. We're humans, we are animals. We're meant to connect with nature. And so having whatever your version of that is, whether it's looking out the window or having it on your desk, some version of that, and also natural light. And, again, certain spaces that can be hard to come by, but that perks people up. That can also be accomplished by getting outside, going for a walk. There's some really interesting research and TED Talks about that, like working while walking and getting inspired while walking. A lot of writers have written about how part of their writing process, their creative process, is actually the walking the dog, right? Because
that's true for me, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so there's a bunch of kind of fun tips and hacks, but I think the most important thing is to open yourself up, right? Open yourself up to possibility and new ideas, and being willing to be creative is probably the most essential component of being creative.
Yeah. I always like to say there are no rules, because I feel like people always feel like there's some kind of rules we have to follow with creativity and innovation. Like, no, just do it however you want to do it.
Yes.
And that is more attractive, even if it's a little messy. It's more, to me, I think it's more attractive to people than you trying to be a cookie cutter version of some formula that everyone else on the planet thinks they have to follow, so
Definitely.
I don't know why it's so hard for so many of us as humans to feel like we don't feel like we have the permission to be creative or something like that.
I mean, it's the quirks that make us interesting. It's the weird new ideas, including and maybe especially the ones that fail, that make us interesting and make us grow and make us do the next great thing. And I don't know, I could go on for, about like, it's the filters and everything, social media. I don't know, there's every 10 years, there'll be a new technology that everybody could complain about and blame everything on. So I'll try not to do that. But I do think we have to continually remind ourselves as the human species, as we become more and more sophisticated, more and more able to perfect things, that it's actually the imperfect that makes things beautiful, interesting, engaging, connected, and to, use those tools judiciously.
Well, I've even been hearing like Instagram, for example, so many people thought everything had to be polished and professional photos and everything. And now more people are migrating towards the people who don't have that because they're more relatable. And
Yeah.
that's why I think the short form videos are so popular, because they're so like authentic and real, and not, I mean, people are using filters and stuff on them, but they're not so like professionally edited and everything like we were used to seeing
Yeah.
before. Just
Did
a
you hear
lot.
about the whole thing of Gen Z? There's like a trend to have the old digital cameras from the 90s because they take these grainy pictures, and that's a whole thing. So they're like trying to look a little more authentic and blurry. It's a trend
Yeah.
also in professional photography, this kind of balance between still being beautiful and professional, but the kind of style aesthetic at the moment is like just a little blurry, a little poorly lit, a little more, as
Yeah.
if a home photographer took it.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, right? It's like, we're trying to look imperfect,
Yeah.
perfectly imperfect. Yeah, I love that. So another thing I just want to circle back around to that you talked about. I love how you talked about how like the strategy is based on war. I've never actually thought about it this way. It's about beating other people a lot of the time. And I know one of the things that you talk about is why it's, the best strategy is to be your best, not try to beat your competition. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to what we were talking about like looking around and copying people or getting intimidated, right? Like it's also easy to, if you have a new idea and then you look around too hard and you go, "Oh, everybody's done everything already."
Yeah.
But they haven't, because your way of doing that thing is going to be different by virtue of it being yours. And so partly it's, I mean, my own personal preference is I don't like that warlike feeling. Maybe some people are different, but I don't enjoy that or thrive on that. So it doesn't inspire me or motivate or energize me to think about like, I'm going to put those guys out of business. So it just doesn't work for me. But I also think it can distract you. This is true for anyone. It can distract you from making your unique contribution, which is what, the word sustainable competitive advantage, like classic business term, that you have an advantage over your competition that is lasting. And it's kind of the holy grail, because a lot of times you might have an advantage, but it's easy for somebody to copy. And so it's not sustainable. Well, guess what? Your sustainable competitive advantage is going to be that thing that only you have, because it comes from your heart and it's in your voice and it's in your vision, and it's not possible to copy because it's this unique proprietary blend of things that comes from you.
I love that so much. So good. Yeah, I don't like anything warlike either. And I feel like there doesn't need to be competition. Like, if we're all so unique that if we all just walk our walks, then there really isn't any competition. Because like you said, your way, what did you say? Your way is going to be different by virtue of it being yours. There's a tweetable for you. I love that. Don't be surprised if you see that quote on my Instagram and my website with this episode. I love it. I love this so much. So I know maybe I should have asked you this sooner, but I'd love you to share kind of, obviously, you have so much expertise on all of the stuff that we've been talking about today. How do you serve people with this expertise? Like, what's the easiest, or what are the different options that people have if they wanted to work with you at some capacity?
Yeah. So like I said, in the last few years, I've kind of taken the classic consulting model, which I've always done. And I still do work with large companies. It's anywhere from a month to 6 month long project. And we do whatever, branding, process, or deliverables they need. I've created with specifically in mind for smaller businesses or individuals, a distilled version of that still has all the pieces, and the process that we talked about before is the version that I've created that has these like very intentional pieces to the process that you'll come out the end with a brand positioning, with a set of brand messaging. And I do that in a kind of a coaching format because I find that it works really well one-on-one. And since I started it, and shortly thereafter the pandemic came along, I crafted it for Zoom. So I sometimes work with people in person if they prefer, but largely it's sessions on Zoom. We do a 5-session kind of going through all the strategy, the workbook. And you come out with, the words and the thoughts and all of that. And then sometimes people also want to use that to go on to create the creative elements, the visual elements. And so then we'll do another 5 weeks where we work on, the brand visual identity. I do that one-on-one. I do that also in small groups, no more than 4 people, because I still want it to be very personal, but sometimes the group is nice because they learn from and inspire each other. So those are few. And then I also do, sometimes people are like, I don't want to do the homework. I want to come in and come out and have it done in a day. So I also do a VIP day version of that, where it's like a day-long session. We work through everything together and I kind of write it up for them later.
I love that. Do you have any like resources as far as if somebody just wanted to do like a little like worksheet or PDF or something like that on your website that people can go through to?
Yes. So I have a couple free downloads on the website. One of them is the quick start guide. And so it's the overview like of the stuff that we talked about here, where you could just kind of go in yourself and start thinking about the big topics. And, if you want to work through the whole thing yourself. And then the other thing I have on there is about, 5 things you can do tomorrow to work happier. Those are more like little tips and inspiration for ways to get out of your own way and be happier at work.
I love that. Can you tell people the name? I'll put it in the show notes as well, but tell people the name of your website.
Yes. So my business is called Susan Meier Studio, but it's easier to remember and to find the website. You can use embracethezigzag.com and that will take you to my website. And you can also find me on Instagram with Embrace the Zigzag.
Love it. Love it. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you if there's anything that we didn't talk about or that I didn't ask you that you want to share with the listeners.
No, I mean, this was such a great conversation because I feel like you and I are very aligned in our, perspectives and values. And I feel like we mined all the good stuff. I mean, this was great. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been great meeting you as well. I feel like, what was it in the beginning when we were just chatting offline and I said, let's talk about that today. Did we talk about that? Whatever. Oh, yeah. I know what it was. I wanted the algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
Algorithm versus sharing who you are and knowing who you are instead of trying to, beat the algorithm or follow a trend. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is people that just, all they care about is how many views they're going to get. Well, who cares if the views are from people that are never going to buy what you sell or want to work with you in any capacity just because it's some trend. So can you speak to that, all of that about just like,
yeah, I think that goes back to like what we were talking about human connection. Right? Like, are you trying to connect with the algorithm, which by the way, is going to abandon you soon enough because it always does. They're going to keep changing the algorithm. Is that what you're trying to connect with? And like you said, losing sight of like, what is the end goal? I mean, maybe you're trying to build a brand, like a mass market brand, and that's its own strategy. But most of the people I work with are not trying to reach millions of customers. They have more small businesses or they're looking to build that tight circle. And even by the way, I've worked with huge companies who are trying to reach millions of customers. And even they are really still trying to reach the inner circle of influencers. So it's more about building a deep relationship with fewer people
Absolutely.
than spamming a million people. So worry less about how to game the system, right? And also, like I said, the system's going to change again and again and again. As soon as you figure it out, everybody else will have figured it out, and it's going to change. So use the opportunity. So what's great about social media, as much as I can sometimes malign it, what's great about social media is how awesome is it that you have a platform to share your voice. I mean, especially like to share your creativity. I mean, you pointed out before, I use Instagram widely for my artwork and my jewelry, because it's like, wow, I found kindred spirits in countries all over the world who are making work that somehow resonates with mine. And then we have a conversation, and I feel like they're that's what it's supposed to be for. So why not do that with your business? Why not like truly go out and make friends and like have a conversation? And yes, your numbers might not look like what you're looking for, but those people are going to either be or lead you to the clients or customers or consumers that you're looking for, because it's a genuine connection.
Yes, I love this. Another mic drop. Worry less about trying to game the system. And I 100% agree. I am grateful every day for the fact that we have these platforms that we just get to use. A lot of them are free, like social media sites, where we get to just be ourselves and speak our minds and share our thoughts and our creativity. And that's a gift. And when we do that authentically, like you said, we attract our tribe rather than trying to game the system and trying to do something trendy that's completely out of character for you or off brand or whatever. So
Yeah.
I love that. Well, this has been awesome. And I'm so glad we got to have this conversation. And I will put, I'm going to like let you say any closing thoughts that you have and just let everybody know. I'll put all of Susan's links in the show notes as well. So if you would like to find her, I know she mentioned a couple of her places that you can find. What is it? Embracethezigzag.com.
Embracethezigzag.com. Yeah.
I love that. Embrace the
Yeah.
zigzag.
So I'll share with you a closing thought. So I'm trying to take my own advice and ask people for feedback, do my, customer research. And so one of the things I've been asking people is like, what is it that you're looking for, like really looking for when you're coming into this kind of process of branding or storytelling, or like, how do I think about how to explain to people what I do? Because you're looking for a story or an elevator pitch, and you're looking for like a roadmap for your career, but like, what does that feel like? And I'm always telling clients to do that, like not just what do you deliver as a product, but how does it make that person feel? So I tried to ask, like, what does it feel like to be in this position where you're seeking out this help? And so I want to say, like, for those of you who are maybe like starting on this journey, like, here's what I heard. Like, I want confidence. I'm struggling with clarity. And I need a community to do this with. I need like a sounding board, feedback, right? Or like to know that other people are going through this. So I found that really inspiring, and I wanted to share it because like, you're not alone. I mean, I think that in this world where we're all connecting with everybody all the time, it's also easy to feel very alone, because it's easy to look like everybody else has this figured out. Everybody does not have this figured out. I work with super smart, super accomplished, super educated people, and they come to me and they're like, help me, So just know that if you're in that spot where you're going, I'm not sure, I'm unclear, lots of good people are right there with you. It is doable. It is gonna be okay. And it's even gonna be fun. So those are some parting thoughts.
Such a good parting thought, because I think it's important to have fun. I mean, if we're doing what we love, we should be having fun, right?
We should be happy. We should be happy at work.
Yes.
It's not like, people say like, it's called work for a reason. No. Life should be good.
Yeah, I know. I was just talking to a dear friend of mine the other day or recently, and he was talking about how, his wife like gives him a hard time because he just works so much, but he's like, I can't even help it. Like all I want to do is work. And I'm like, that's how I feel. Like I love what I do. And I just want to, I love to create stuff. And I always am having ideas and I just want to go create stuff. And that's how it should feel. Right. And that's how it should feel for all of us, like to just really be doing. So I feel like when we do what we love, it doesn't feel like work. And also like that's where we're going to thrive financially too. I mean, the money will follow when
100%.
you're
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're in the right flow. I mean, and back to living in alignment. That is living in alignment.
exactly. Yes. So thank you so much, Susan. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm sure everybody else has as well. So be sure and go to embracethezigzag.com and learn more about Susan and how you can connect with her further. And we will see you in the next episode.